If you have a lens with a maximum aperture of f4 and you use f4, the aperture is actually invisible. You are not using the aperture. But if you select a smaller aperture than the maximum aperture, such as f8, the aperture thing comes into play and it reduces the size of the lens opening. The number on the lens is the maximum aperture, which unhelpfully is the smallest number, but the largest opening. Change to the highest aperture number, and this is called the minimum aperture, which equally unhelpfully is the largest number. The larger the aperture, the more light gets through to the sensor. The larger the aperture, the smaller the aperture value, as in f4. The smaller the aperture, the less light gets through to the camera sensor. The smaller the aperture, the larger the aperture value, such as f22. So what do these aperture values mean? Well, what does the number f4 actually mean? I've got no idea. No idea at all. But I can tell you this. If you go from f4 to f5.6, that's one stop, as is f5.6 to f8, f8 to f11, f11 to f16, f16 to f22. Each stop is a halving or a doubling of the light, depending on which way you go. But I can't tell you what f4 actually is, as in what it actually means. So much so that if you check out episode 171, you'll find my new aperture scale, which makes just as much sense as the one that we have now. It really does. That's good stuff, that. That was the episode where I modernised photography and sort of decimalised it and made it a lot simpler. It's a great episode, even if I do say so myself. Getting back to the numbers, let's not worry what the numbers actually are. What we need to understand is what they do. So the smallest number is the biggest aperture and the largest number is the smallest aperture. I mean, it could have been the other way around, couldn't it? People will say no because of the fraction thing, but shall I move on? Yes, Rick, move on.